bring it on. Like that.
So there's a few ways to build a studio, and certainly really no single way to get it done. However, I might just want to start off with the first kind of fork in the road, and that is whether you're going to be using a standalone hardware recorder or a computer-based one like this. Let's look at the pros and cons of each. In the hardware world, obviously the biggest pro is that you have a completely portable solution with quick setup. There's absolutely no latency at all, and it's a very rock solid setup. Now the cons in terms of that is that you have limited tracks on any particular hardware recorder. It'll either be, a 16 track or a 24 or a 32 track or something like that. There will be some sort of limit on those tracks. You'll also have limited built-in effects, limited expandability, and also limited sound sources. In other words, some of these might have some rudimentary drum machines inside them, but typically they won't have any MIDI synth modules or anything like that. So they're basically just for recording audio. And if there is any sound sources in them, they'll probably just be kind of a rudimentary drum machine. Now compare that over on the other side with the software. You have unlimited tracks and unlimited effects and built-in sound sources. This is a really, really biggie because apart from it just recording your audio from the outside world, it has a virtual music store inside in terms of drum machines and synthesizers and keyboard sounds, guitar effects, and also all that kind of stuff. And it's also normally expandable via plugins as well, so you can expand that functionality via that. Now, in terms of the cons, sometimes for some people it's a little bit more of a complicated setup, and there also can be latency issues. You never think about this in the hardware thing, is that when you record, whatever you hear basically gets recorded instantaneously. Sometimes there can be latency issues that you have to have a kind of a workaround there. And also you may need to upgrade licenses. If your computer is upgrading its OS, sometimes that will age out certain versions of your software, so you kind of have to keep on top of that stuff. And then of course you will need additional hardware to get sound in and out of your computer. So you can see that there are kind of two different lanes that you want to go down if you're going to be setting up your home studio. If you're just sick and tired of dealing with computers and just want something to drop in your backpack and take to a gig or a rehearsal to quickly record, then a hardware recorder might be good for you. If you want maximum expandability and options, then probably the software route would be a better route for you. Now, I've actually suggested a hybrid approach to a few of my students who like the portability of a hardware recorder to take to a gig or whatever. But then, there's really no comparison when you mix down. A DAW wins hands down there in terms of the number of tracks, the effects, and the power at mixed down. So if you have a hardware recorder that records onto an SD card or something like that, or something that produces audio files that can be easily transferred to a computer, you might want to try that hybrid approach. So now that we have all the parts laid out, let's basically set up the right questions to ask as we seek to build your dream home studio. So over on the hardware side, first question is, how many tracks? Early on, a lot of them were 8 tracks. Now they're 16, 24, 32. You definitely want to give yourself some breathing room there and get as many tracks as you like. Now, how many simultaneous tracks and also how many inputs is really important. If you are a singer-songwriter, typically, you don't need more than 2 inputs so that you can bring your, say, a vocal microphone and your guitar or something like that to record that at the same time. So, 2 inputs and 2 simultaneous tracks would be fine for a singer-songwriter. But if you're going to be recording, your band and taking this along to rehearsal, you definitely want to have a lot more inputs. In this case, this recorder has 8 inputs, and I think up to 8 simultaneous tracks can be recorded there. On those lines, how many effects do you have? Everything is built in, so you want to make sure you have enough effects. Quite often there will be some sort of inline effect, like some guitar effects or vocal compressors, and then something that you can place along an effects send for across all your tracks, like things like reverb, delay, and things like that. So make sure you have enough effects. Now, in terms of connectivity, make sure you have some sort of way of getting in and out of your machine. If it's a closed box and there's no USB ports or any removable media, something like that, you're really locked in to doing everything in that box. I would look for some sort of external connectivity so that you can at least get your tracks in and out in terms of importing and exporting those tracks. Along those lines, in recording media, quite often the very early ones used to record on hard disks. And quite often they were proprietary hard disks or special hard disks that you could only really get from the manufacturer, and they'd void your warranty if you open up the box and all that kind of stuff. You don't want that. If you can find a recorder that records on cheap removable media like SD cards or something like that, that's the way to go, because then you can have a multiple bunch of SD cards for different projects, and if anything gets corrupted, then you can just get another SD card for $20. And if that SD card can then just be popped out and popped into a computer, then all the better to be able to import and export your tracks very easily. Now, how sturdy? If you are just leaving this in your home recording setup, that's probably not a big deal, but if you're moving it around, you definitely don't want a cheap plastic one. You want to have something that's a little bit more sturdy. And then finally, the user interface. Have a look at the screen that's on that piece of hardware. If you're going to be staring into that for a long period of time, so make sure that it has a nice big screen and you're happy with the way that the user interface is. Maybe go to a music store and kind of get used to the way that is.